When I was burning with fever, my body weak and trembling, Damien Blackwell left me stranded on the desolate outskirts of the city, just so he could sit by the ocean with his first love, Cassandra Leigh. For 6 long years, he had lectured me, shaping me, teaching me how to be independent, how to survive on my own, only to turn around and tell her that she deserved to be cherished by the entire world. In that moment, I realized I no longer needed him, nor did I want him. Her voice suddenly burst through the phone, bright and excited. "Damien, do you hear the sound of the waves?" His face shifted immediately, his hands tightening on the steering wheel as he slammed the brakes. "Cassandra, where are you?" She laughed softly on the other end. I was feeling miserable, but when I reached the shore, I found a peace I haven't felt in so long. "The night ocean is dark, Damien. I'm a little scared, but when my feet sink into the sand, it feels solid grounding. The water is freezing, I can barely stand it. You're cold, then let me take you out for hot pot. Remember that place with the tripe you loved?" His voice tried to sound calm, but the hand clutching the phone trembled violently. A tiny red dot blinked on the GPS, and he knew exactly where she was. He was about to turn the car around when I, sitting in the passenger seat, gripped his wrist to stop him. Only then did he seem to remember I was still in the car. Because of my resistance, his face darkened, his eyes hardening into something cold and cruel. I gave him a faint smile and pressed the mute button on the call screen. "Let me out here, Damien. I need to get to the hospital. I'm burning at 102 degrees. We were on our way there before your phone rang." But one call from Cassandra was enough to make him forget I even existed. He stammered, "Juliette, Cassandra, I knew what he wanted to say. That she needed him more than I did. That I was just a grown woman with a fever, not a helpless child." So I nodded, pretending to understand. "I get it. Go to her. I'll manage on my own." Before he could answer, I opened the door and stepped out into the night air. I stood by the roadside as his car idled for 5 seconds. Then the headlights swung around and he sped away like a storm, leaving me swaying and feverish in the dark. Cassandra Leigh had been his first love in college. Damien was allergic to mangoes, but just to impress her, he once forced himself to eat an entire box until his body broke out in hives. Yet she still left him, choosing someone she thought was a better option. That rejection had shattered him, left him drowning in insecurity and self-loathing. I was not the one who saved him from that abyss. By the time we met, he had already climbed out, confident, composed, with the calm authority of a man who had rebuilt himself. He became the guide who shaped me, the mentor who taught me how to be better. He was the one who turned me into a different version of myself. But the way he molded me was never the way I had hoped for. 2 years ago, Cassandra reappeared broken after the man she had chosen cheated on her and abused her. She fell into a deep depression, the kind that devours the soul. Damien became her therapist. He told me he had long since let go, that she was nothing more than a patient. And at first that was true. Until she stopped paying him, until that night when he looked at her and whispered, "You deserve to be cherished by the whole world." It was Damien's best friend's birthday, and to celebrate he had chosen a farm out on the edge of the city. The scenery was beautiful, full of games and laughter, but too far away from everything. 10 minutes passed and no driver accepted my ride request. My fever burned higher, my legs refused to hold me. I sank onto the curb, debating whether to call an ambulance, when from the distance, headlights approached, and a voice I vaguely recognized called out, "Juliette Ramsay, what are you doing here?" I squinted through the haze and saw a familiar figure, someone from Damien's childhood. Rowan Kingsley stepped out of the car and hurried to my side, his arms steadying me before I collapsed. "What happened to you? Where the hell is Damien?" His voice was sharp, laced with anger. I didn't have the strength to tell the world about Damien's betrayal. I only managed a weak plea. "Can you take me to the hospital? I don't think I can hold out much longer." I wasn't exaggerating. The moment I slid into his passenger seat, the dizziness swallowed me whole, and I closed my eyes, too weak to lift them again. Somewhere in the haze, I heard Rowan's voice, firm and furious, as he spoke on the phone. "I don't care how busy you are, Damien. I don't care if Cassandra is standing on the edge of a cliff threatening to throw herself into the ocean. You should have called us. Out of all your friends, anyone could have taken your wife to the hospital. If I hadn't doubled back, she would have been lying unconscious on the side of the road, and no one would have given a damn. You're a selfish bastard, Damien, and I hope you rot for it." The words weren't directed at me, but hearing someone finally defend me lit a small warmth in my chest. My lips curved faintly as exhaustion dragged me deeper, and I slept the rest of the way. When I woke, it was well past midnight. My phone screen was blank, no missed calls, no worried texts from Damien. Instead, there was a single message from Rowan. I had to leave, but I arranged for someone to watch over you. Text me when you're awake so I know you're safe. I typed back quickly. I'm awake. I'm fine, thank you. Then after a pause, I added, when you have time, let me take you to dinner. It's the least I can do. By morning, the IV drip was finished and I signed my discharge papers. I called in for a day off and went straight to the law office of an old friend. One of his associates greeted me with practice calm and slid a stack of papers across the desk. A divorce agreement. If you want to file, you can reach out anytime. I thought for a long moment, maybe I wouldn't need to file, maybe it wouldn't come to that. But I nodded anyway and thanked him. When I got home, Damien wasn't there. From the untouched rooms and stale air, I could tell he hadn't come back at all the night before. I didn't bother calling him. Instead, I pulled out a suitcase and began to pack. There was so little of me left in this house anyway. Only 3 pairs of shoes sat on the rack, a handful of seasonal clothes hung in the closet. I had emptied my office last week, taking the computers and papers to a new apartment. As for the rest, the endless little things that tied me to this place, I decided they were better off destroyed than carried with me. I spent hours sorting and discarding until nothing remained but a single suitcase, standing silent in the living room waiting for him. Damien walked in at 6. His eyes caught on the suitcase, and for a moment he froze. Business trip. I shook my head. No, I'm moving out. His brows furrowed. What do you mean? I reached into my bag and placed the divorce papers in his hands. We should end this. He stared at me for a few seconds, then shoved me aside with an irritated growl. Stop with the drama. I haven't slept all night. I'm exhausted. I forced my voice to stay level. This isn't drama. Read it. If there's anything you don't agree with, we can talk it through. You're serious about this, yes? He laughed bitterly. Juliette Ramsay, are you threatening me? Adults don't throw tantrums like this. Divorce, moving out, you're not a child. I had heard those lines too many times. Once they made me question myself, then they made me furious. Now they made me feel nothing at all. I pressed the PI stay, get out. Damien barked, his voice sharp and cold, but I didn't flinch. I kept my tone calm, almost gentle as I reminded him. Tomorrow, 8 o'clock in the morning, we meet at the county clerk's office. My mind drifted back to how we first met. It was at a blind date, something I had agreed to only out of curiosity when I was barely 20, still in college, and too young to imagine marriage. I had walked into that restaurant expecting boredom, maybe a few awkward laughs, and nothing more. But then I saw Damien Blackwell. He had this quiet presence, polished and composed, and for a moment I was breathless. Without thinking, I blurted out, "So this is the kind of quality blind dates come with these days." He had chuckled, genuinely surprised, and I could see he hadn't expected to take this meeting seriously either. We traded a few polite words, exchanged numbers out of courtesy, and left it at that. 3 months later, I called him. Not as a woman chasing romance, but as a patient desperate for help. He was a psychiatrist and I was lost. "Dr. Blackwell," I asked, "what does it mean if I hear my toothbrush talking to me?" He answered without hesitation. "It means you need to see me." That same day, I underwent countless tests and evaluations with Damien at my side, guiding me, steadying me, his voice calm, his presence unshakable. When it was over, he told me, "You're ill, you'll need medication." I had protested, "But I don't feel sick." He only smiled, "Take the medicine for a while, and soon you'll realize you are." And so I did. That was the beginning of a year where I leaned on him more than I leaned on anyone else. He was patient, kind, always smiling when he spoke to me, always reassuring. "It's nothing serious," he would murmur. "I can fix this." And he did. He spent a year treating me, and I spent 6 months chasing him, until finally we fell in love. We married, built a home, and lived together for 6 years. We hadn't even reached the so-called 7-year itch, and yet we had already collapsed. But now I had let go. I snapped a photo of the divorce papers and posted them online. The first person to react was my mother, Elaine Ramsay. Her calls came in one after another. Her texts flooded, in each one crueler than the last. Calling me a coward, a disgrace, an embarrassment to our family name. Rather than let her words drive me into the hospital, I blocked her number and let silence fill my world. Moments later, my best friend Fiona Mercer called. She was the only one who knew I had wanted this divorce from the beginning, Jules, I know you've been waiting for this, but isn't it a little early to celebrate? I laughed. This isn't celebration, this is strategy. He thinks I'm just sulking. If I don't back him into a corner, he won't show up tomorrow. Fiona sighed. I guess that's true. Damien was 6 years older than me. My mother used to warn that the 6-year gap was unlucky, that our life cycles would never align. But Damien's perfection had silenced her fears, even made her believe I had earned some cosmic reward by marrying him. Maybe because of that age gap, he had always treated me like a child. When he was kind, it was as if he was cradling a fragile little girl. When he was cruel, it was as if he was scolding one. His most common refrain was always, "You're not a child anymore." My post worked. The next morning when I arrived at the county clerk's office, Damien was already there, but he wasn't alone. Cassandra Leigh stood beside him, her arm linked through his. She turned to me, her expression a mixture of pity and provocation. Damien told me you two were divorcing. I was shocked. Juliette, don't be impulsive. If this is about what happened the other night, I apologize. All right. Her tone was patronizing, like a teacher soothing a child, but her eyes betrayed the challenge beneath. I smiled faintly, my lips curling. Then apologize. What? She blinked, startled. I said apologize. You just offered, didn't you? For a second she was thrown off balance, but then she recovered quickly, clinging tighter to Damien's arm and softening her voice. It seems Juliette is really upset. Damien, say something to her. Damien's eyes were icy, his face carved from stone. She's not a child, Cassandra. She doesn't need to be pacified. Cassandra pressed on her tone, coaxing Damien. Don't be like that. You promised you'd talk to her calmly. I cut her off. Ms. Leigh, I'm curious. You keep calling me Juliette as though we're intimate. Tell me, since when have we been that close? The color drained from her face. Damien's voice dropped into a heavy scold, his tone sharp enough to sting. Juliette Ramsay, have you completely forgotten your manners? A wave of irritation rose in me, but I forced my voice to stay even. If I remember correctly, we came here today to finalize a divorce. Damien, are you stalling? His face darkened, a flicker of anger crossing his eyes before he muttered, stubborn fool. Together we stepped into the clerk's office. The process was strangely quiet, as though even the air itself was holding its breath. When it was over, the clerk reminded us to return in a month to collect the official certificate. As we walked out, Damien turned to me with that same calculated calmness he always wore. When are you planning to come back for your things? He asked. I looked at him in disbelief. Don't you see? See what he pressed. That house doesn't hold a single piece of me anymore. It was almost laughable that he couldn't understand. 2 years into our marriage, Damien had suggested separate bedrooms. Even as his wife, he explained we needed space, independence, room to breathe if we wanted longevity. I had believed him, swallowed the reasoning like gospel, even though all I wanted was to fall asleep beside him. I agreed because I thought compromise was part of love. From then on, even when we still shared intimacy once or twice a week, he would rise immediately afterward and retreat to his own room. More than once I had tugged at his sleeve, begging softly if he would just stay with me for a night, but his eyes always glimmered with that look reserved for children who broke rules. Juliette, we agreed. We must keep our promises. The farce carried on until one evening when a friend of his came by unexpectedly and caught Damien sleeping on the couch. His friend teased him. What happened? Did your wife kick you out? Damien only gave his usual indifferent smile and said, No, I suggested it. She clings too much, it's suffocating. He said it so casually as though I wasn't even human but some needy nuisance. That single remark lived inside me, eating away at every tender memory we had built. So it was no surprise that my mother showed up soon after. Elaine Ramsay had my new address not because of motherly affection, but because I knew her well enough to predict her chaos. If she couldn't find me, she would raise hell at my company. If that failed, she would hunt down Damien himself, and I couldn't stomach her meddling in his life any longer. Damien had once analyzed her behavior to me. Back when I was still sick, explaining her motives, her hidden manipulations, her warped sense of control. He had laughed about it, a half-smile that blended mockery with pity, saying she was as transparent as glass. I had hated that expression, hated the way he reduced her to a joke, even if he wasn't entirely wrong. Now she was here in the flesh, her words cutting into me like poisoned daggers. Damien wants to divorce you. What did you do to anger him? Why must you always cause trouble for others? And you had to humiliate yourself by posting it online. What were you thinking? How many times have I told you have a baby already? You're nearly 30 with no child to your name, useless girl. Do you know how humiliating it is for me? Having people whisper that my daughter is barren? Do you know the shame I endure, the sleepless nights, the meals I can't finish, the games of cards I can't enjoy? You don't care, do you? You only think of yourself. You go make peace with Damien right now, do you hear me? If you dare go through with this divorce, you are no longer my daughter. Her tirade was nothing new. I had heard these words 100 times, felt them bruise me over and over until they no longer drew blood. But this time, something inside me cracked. For once I asked her, "Do you really not care why I want this divorce?" Why? She shot back, "What reason could you possibly need? If you can't hold on to your husband, you've already failed." Juliette Ramsay let me make this clear. "If you divorce, don't ever call me your mother again." My reply was calm, almost cold. "All right then, Elaine." The way her eyes widened told me she hadn't expected that, not from me. For a few seconds, she looked stunned before her fury erupted like a storm. "Juliette Ramsay, you want me dead, don't you? You're pushing me into my grave. Do you know how much I sacrificed to raise you? Every meal, every night, I stayed awake for you. And this is the thanks I get. You want to kill your own mother?" She screamed until her face turned red, her body trembling as though on the edge of collapse, accusing me of sins I had never committed. I stood there quietly watching the woman who had given me life, but never once offered love without strings. The truth was bitter and cruel. My mother had no sense of right or wrong, no real moral compass. Her world revolved around appearances, control and power, and I had been nothing but a pawn in her desperate game, to be seen, to be admired, to be envied. My mother had never known what lines should never be crossed. In that moment, she behaved as though divorce itself was some kind of mortal sin, a violation of every principle and shred of decency. But it was the very same woman who once tried to sell me to my former boss for money. She had arranged a side job for me at a real estate development company, where the owner happened to be an old classmate of my late father. She told me I would be learning accounting, that it was good experience, and I believed her. But one night that man, drunk and shameless, blocked me inside his car and whispered that if I agreed to spend the night with him, he would pay me $5,000 a month. I shook with fear and disgust. When I told my mother, hoping for comfort, she was silent for a long moment before finally answering. "5,000 is too little. Tell him to make it 50,000, and if he agrees, accept." In that moment, I felt my soul collapse. I quit the job in a daze, stumbled back into school, without even knowing how I got there. But my mother refused to let me go. She pressed me to return, warning that if I did not finish the handover properly, she could not face him. I knew what she really meant. She was willing to feed me to wolves. It was during that period when despair had consumed me that I became Damien Blackwell's patient. My depression had hollowed me out, left me clinging to survival by threads. I remember one night I pulled a kitchen knife and threw it onto the table in front of my mother. She recoiled, startled for once, into silence. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "Do whatever you like," I told her flatly. "Kill me or watch me kill myself, as long as it brings you peace. But hear me clearly, I will divorce him." The silence that followed was so heavy it suffocated the air. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She muttered that I looked hideous holding a knife. I grabbed her wrist and pulled her to the window, my voice sharp as glass. "Then let's go together, mother and daughter both. You do not want to live, so I will return the life you gave me." Her face drained of color. She yanked away from me and fled toward the door, shouting over her shoulder, "If you want to die, then do it yourself. Don't drag me with you." When the door slammed, the world finally grew quiet again. My body felt drained, my mind blank. I collapsed to the floor and, strangely, I drifted into sleep, as though exhaustion itself was my only refuge. I woke to the shrill sound of my phone. It was Damien. His voice was as detached as ever. "What about the handbags and jewelry?" he asked. For a second, I didn't understand. Then it struck me he meant the gifts he had once given me. They were his, and he wanted them gone. His tone carried no warmth, only a cold decree. "Things I give are never taken back, so throw them away." Then he hung up. I thought of blocking his number, severing the thread entirely, but reminded myself that we still needed to sign for the final certificate. Knowing him, he would never reach out again once rejected. But I was wrong. 4 days later, my phone lit up with his name while I was at dinner, keeping a promise to Rowan Kingsley. Rowan, with his cool demeanor, had always seemed distant, but as I got to know him, I discovered something steadier beneath the surface. His warmth was different from Damien's feigned gentleness. Damien's kindness was a facade, a polite mask hiding ice underneath. Rowan's warmth was lived in, real, a calm, forged by time. I thanked him for being there. He asked about my health, whether I was truly recovering, and listened with genuine care. We talked about work. When I told him I was now employed at a tax office, he raised his brows in surprise. I laughed softly and explained that 2 years ago I had passed the CPA exams, so I had shifted to accounting. Rowan nodded with quiet admiration. "Impressive," he said before adding, "Damien clearly never saw who you really were." I lowered my eyes and replied faintly that he probably still didn't know. I once told him about my dream of becoming a CPA, and his only reaction had been dismissive. "Don't waste time chasing things beyond your reach," he had said. Rowan was not the type to dwell on gossip, so we let the subject go and continued our meal. Conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in months, I felt almost human again. After dinner, as we stepped out of the restaurant, my phone rang. Damien again. "Where's the body wash in the house?" he asked flatly. I stayed silent, refusing to indulge him. And then I heard it, a woman's voice in the background, playful and careless. "Damien, did you really call Juliette? What if she misunderstands what then? Forget it, I won't take a shower." It was Cassandra Leigh. I let out a small laugh and answered casually. "The body wash is in the bottom cabinet, the bathrobe is on the top shelf. Enjoy yourselves." Before I could hang up, Damien's voice suddenly sharpened, urgent, almost desperate. "Juliette, don't misunderstand. Cassandra and I only had dinner nearby. The waiter spilled soup on her, that's all." I wanted to tell him he did not owe me an explanation, that he was no longer entitled to my attention. But before the words could form, I misstepped and nearly fell. Rowan's hand caught me, instantly steady and firm. "Be careful," he murmured. On the other end of the line, Damien fell into a chilling silence. After a few beats, his voice roared through the phone. "Who are you with?" My brow tightened, my voice cool. Detached. "We are divorced, Damien. Weddings or funerals, none of it has anything to do with you anymore." Rowan leaned closer, his voice calm. "If you need me to, I can explain to him." I turned, meeting his gaze, and asked softly, "Do you not believe I truly want this divorce?" "Either." Rowan held my eyes for a long time before finally answering. "I believe you." I smiled faintly. Thank you for that." I thought I had put an end to everything, that my words had finally drawn the line between us. But Damien proved me wrong. He began calling incessantly, appearing outside my building uninvited. That night, when Rowan walked me home and we reached the gates of my apartment complex, Damien stormed out from his car like a predator unleashed. His fist swung without warning and connected hard with Rowan's face. "I considered you a brother," he shouted, "and this is how you repay me, by seducing my wife." Rowan took the blow without resistance, silent and steady. But when Damien raised his fist again, Rowan's hand shot out, catching him firmly, his voice like ice. "Enough!" I rushed forward and shoved Damien back with all my strength. "What the hell is wrong with you?" He stared at me as if he could not comprehend what he was seeing. "You are protecting him." His eyes burned with betrayal. My teeth clenched as I spat the words. "You are sick, Damien." Then Cassandra Leigh appeared, gliding slowly from the shadows. She clutched Damien's arm, her eyes heavy with disapproval as she looked at me. "Juliette, you are so stubborn. Even if you are angry, you should not destroy the bond between Damien and Rowan." Rowan laughed coldly, his patience gone. "Tell me, Cassandra, when exactly did we become so close?" Her face drained of color, trembling. "Rowan, I know you do not like me." He cut her off mercilessly. "Then you should stay silent." "Enough." Damien barked, stepping instinctively in front of Cassandra, as though shielding her. His glare locked onto Rowan. "When did it start between you two?" I exhaled heavily, my chest tightening with disgust. "Damien, you are so filthy in your mind that you see filth in everyone else." Cassandra interjected quickly, her voice sharp. "But I saw you step out of Rowan's car from the passenger seat. Isn't that seat reserved for a girlfriend?" I tilted my head and gave her a mocking smile. "So you know that, do you?" Her lips quivered, her face twisted into a mask of wounded innocence. I only sat there because I was carsick. That was all. Listen to yourself." Everyone around could see it was a pathetic excuse, a feeble lie, but Damien clung to her as though blind. I turned to him, exhaustion seeping into my bones. What do you want from me? Why can you not let me go? Must I suffer your torment forever? His expression faltered, confusion flickering across his features. Torment. You think I am tormenting you? My voice was flat, stripped of all feeling. How did you even know I lived here? You must have asked my mother. You know her better than I do. You know that the moment you go to her, she will imagine there is still hope between us. She will cling to that hope and harass me endlessly. But you do not care, because to you managing my relationship with my mother is my burden, not yours. Am I right? Those were your exact words to me once, Damien. That is your mother, you told me. And you must learn to handle her yourself. Otherwise, what has all my treatment of you been for? I stared at him, bitterness rising in my throat. And what about her? I pointed directly at Cassandra. You can manage everything for her. The issues with her friends, her family, every minor problem, you solve them all for her. Why is that? Because in your eyes, Cassandra is the one worthy of being cherished by the entire world. And me, Juliette Ramsay. I was always left to carry everything on my own. I drew in a deep breath, my eyes steady on Damien. But I did carry it, Damien Blackwell. You taught me how to fight the world alone. That is why I no longer need you. Because of Damien and Cassandra's endless entanglements, Rowan was dragged into the mess once more, escorting me home. Though he refused to step inside. He stopped at the door, his voice soft but firm. Try to rest, good night. Guilt tugged at me, but exhaustion had drained me of everything, body and soul. I had no words left, so I only nodded and watched him walk away. Damien insisted on speaking with me, and I agreed. We met again in his office at my request, because I wanted our conversation to be rational for once. He sat across from me, still cloaked in his familiar arrogance. His first words were, this time, I was wrong. I should not have abandoned you to find Cassandra, but her condition was serious. I was afraid she might do something reckless. After all, she is a patient. I had no choice. You must understand that. But I promise you I will handle things with her better from now on. His words had that same flavor I knew too well, a slap followed by a sweet candy. I sat in silence before answering. Half a year ago, Cassandra got into a minor accident. She called you. You had been awake all night the day before yet. The moment she called, you rushed to her side. You told me afterward she had no one else, only you. Damien frowned. What are you trying to say? I fixed my gaze on him. If it had been me in that accident, would you have come? He stammered, of course. But we both knew the truth hung heavy between us. I reminded him of what happened just a month ago. Because the coolant hose on your car had aged and leaked, your car broke down while I was using it. I thought it natural to call you for help, but your answer was cold. If you have an accident, call the police. If you are sick, call an ambulance. If your car breaks down, call a mechanic. Juliette, these are the basics of life. You had pulled off your glasses that day, pinching the bridge of your nose in irritation. You told me I had to be more sensible. I remembered how sharp your words had cut. That day we had argued, and because I did not apologize, you decided to punish me by withholding any care. I looked at him now, my tone like ice. Yes, we had argued, and because I would not bow my head, you punished me in every way possible. He shot back. Is it wrong to admit your mistakes? Anger surged, and I rose from my chair, my eyes blazing. The biggest mistake of my life was marrying you. His hand darted out, gripping mine tightly. Desperation creeping into his voice. What do you really want from me? My answer came without hesitation. I want one thing. When this last month is over, do not go back on your word. The boldest thing I ever did in my life was to chase you, Damien. You helped me when I was drowning so much that I once believed I could not live without you. You were the first person who made me know what it felt like to lose sleep, to lose appetite because of love. The days without you left me hollow, withering, like a flower starved of sun. I did not understand what was happening to me. I only knew I wanted to be near you. Back then, I was blind, consumed by love. I clung to you. I was jealous, insecure, suspicious, everything you despised. So you broke me down piece by piece and rebuilt me into someone who could survive without you. The days when you no longer sought me out passed quickly. I traveled twice for work. When I returned, the security guard at my building told me my mother had come 3 times looking for me, but he had turned her away. Cassandra somehow had found my number and sent me messages full of blame. Because of you, Damien and Rowan have turned against each other. Are you satisfied now? I ignored her pitiful accusations, but I did call Rowan. If you need me to, I can explain things to Damien. Rowan did not answer right away. Instead, he asked, "What about you? Do you need it?" My voice was calm, steady. "No." "Then neither do I." There was a quiet pause before he spoke again. "You are back from your business trip, aren't you?" My heart skipped. "How did you know?" He replied softly. "I went by your office once looking for you. Is something wrong?" I asked, my voice wary. Rowan leaned back slightly, his tone calm yet warm. "The finance department at one of our branches suddenly had someone resign, and we haven't found a replacement. I wanted to ask if you would consider working part-time as an accountant." I couldn't help but smile faintly. "I'm expensive," he chuckled softly. "Then I suppose I'll have to work harder to afford you." I laughed too, surprised by how easily he could lighten my mood. "All right then, I'll come by tomorrow so we can go over the details." He nodded. "Good, I have a meeting right after this, so I'll let you go." When the call ended, I leaned back almost amused at myself. Perhaps I had been wrong about him after all. Working with Rowan turned out to be surprisingly smooth. The branch didn't have too much work, and outsourcing the accounting made sense. We quickly agreed on the terms and signed the contract. Just as we were wrapping up, he glanced at his watch and apologized. "I have another meeting, I can't keep you longer." I felt an odd sense of relief as I left. Maybe I had been wrong to read too much into his intentions. On the 12th day, Damien came to find me again. He looked worn, more haggard than usual. His voice was heavy. "You changed jobs and didn't even tell me." I furrowed my brow, exhaustion weighing down my tone. "What exactly do you want from me, Damien?" He met my gaze, his expression conflicted. "Do you really want a divorce?" I let out a humorless laugh. "What else would I want?" Fiona Mercer, my closest friend, had once told me bluntly. "In your relationship, even though Damien is 6 years older, you're the one carrying him. You meet every demand, bend to every expectation. No wonder he takes you for granted and forgets how to reflect on himself." She had been right. For years I had given and given until he thought he was entitled to everything. This time I was the one who asked to talk. I told him, "I already told you before when I decided to take the CPA exam, I told you. But you dismissed me, said I would never pass. When I switched jobs, I didn't hide it, but you never believed me. You thought I was dreaming. Even when I bought my house, I didn't keep it from you. Last year I started renovating it. 2 months ago I began moving my things bit by bit right in front of you. Why did you never ask yourself why you didn't see it, why you didn't hear it?" Damien looked at me as if he didn't recognize me. "But you weren't like this before." I curved my lips into a cold smile. "That's thanks to you. My mother was never a guide in life. She never taught me what I should or shouldn't do, never spoke to me about pride or dignity. I had to stumble, make mistakes, and learn everything on my own. My understanding of the world came late. When I first met Damien, he would often shake his head in disappointment, muttering things like, 'How could you not know even this?' 'What did your family teach you?' If it were me now, I would have answered calmly. But back then, I felt ashamed. I thought I was the one who was wrong. He taught me his version of principles and demanded I live by them. I could not be weak. I could not show negative emotions. I could not lean on him for help. Every word I spoke had to be positive. I was not allowed to criticize anyone, not allowed to complain about work, not allowed to lack basic knowledge, and certainly not allowed to simply enjoy life without struggle. Every reproach chipped away at my self-worth until it shattered completely. Damien, do you know this? There were nights I thought about ending it all because the pain was unbearable. I even went to a temple, knelt before a Buddha, and begged for a sign. I cannot remember what the fortune slip said or how the monk explained it. All I remember is how I cried endlessly, as if I could pour out an entire lifetime of tears. His face went pale, lips trembling, his voice unsteady. "You are my wife. I only wanted you to become better." I looked at him with a calmness that cut sharper than rage. "Damien Blackwell, you are a psychiatrist. Use your expertise and think carefully about what you did to me. Was it really love, or was it another kind of control?" He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised a hand stopping him. "Think about it, really think." This man had shattered my self-esteem piece by piece, but I was the one who picked up the fragments, stitched them back together, and became the woman standing before him now. On the 18th day, Damien showed up outside my building. He called me, his voice frantic and broken. "I was wrong, Juliette. I will change, please forgive me. I will never speak to Cassandra again. I will never do anything that hurts you. Tell me what you want and I will do it. If that is not enough, I will give you my life. Would that make it enough? He carried a box full of mangoes, his favorite fruit, and began eating them one after another like a man gone mad. His lips and cheeks flushed an angry red, his bare arms breaking out in angry welts that anyone could see. But he did not stop. By the time the ambulance arrived, Damien was struggling to breathe. Even as he was lifted onto the stretcher, I never once went downstairs. The light of desperate hope in his eyes faded slowly until his lids closed and his body went limp. The first person to confront me was Cassandra Leigh. Her envy was so raw it bled through her voice. Why he still loves me, that is what this proves. He loves me. You and he are divorced, Juliette Ramsay. What did you do to him? I met her gaze steady and deliberate. The truth is, I always hated you. But I never once stopped you from being around Damien. Do you know why? She blinked speechless, and I answered my own question. Because your existence saved me. It was only when I saw the way he looked at you with regret and longing that I finally understood. Damien Blackwell is not a god. He is just a man, and not even a very clean one at that. The second to come was my mother. Elaine looked at me with exasperation, shaking her head, as if she could not comprehend me at all. Damien has done all of this, nearly killed himself, and still you will not forgive him. How much is enough? He has given you a way down from the stage, and yet you refuse to step off it. I stared at her in disbelief. Why do you want me to stay with him, Mother? Damien has always demanded that I cut ties with you, that I stop supporting you financially, and you know it. So why of all people are you the one asking me to go back to him? Her face darkened instantly, and without a word, she turned and fled. The third to appear was Rowan Kingsley. I braced myself thinking he too had come because of Damien. But all he said was, I have to take a short business trip. We rushed to one of the branch offices together, handing over files to the outgoing finance manager and reviewing the books. There was too much to finish in one day, so we decided to stay overnight. That evening, Rowan smiled mysteriously and said he wanted to take me somewhere. After winding through quiet streets, we stopped before an old building with faded yet dignified architecture. I thought it was a historic site in the old district, but he shook his head. This is a bar. I opened it years ago. I was startled. Here. Does it even have customers? Rowan sighed. If you had asked me that years ago, I would never have invested in it. I listened to the wrong people, rushed into it without thinking, and it failed miserably. I didn't make money, but I learned how to mix drinks better than anyone. He stepped behind the counter, his hands moving with a smooth rhythm, pouring, shaking, straining until the liquid in the glass shimmered like liquid gold. 2 guests in the bar walked over asking for a drink. Rowan only smiled and pushed the glass toward me. I'm sorry, this one is for her. That night, he became my personal bartender. I drank more than I should have, enough to feel lightheaded though not drunk. The music was soft and mellow, the air carried the perfect temperature, even the breeze drifting in through the half-open window seemed tailored for peace. I felt myself floating weightless, as if in a world without burdens. Rowan leaned toward me, his voice gentle. Are you happy? I smiled, nodded, and whispered, Yes, I am. Later, Damien told me that if I came to the hospital just once to see him, he would not drag out the divorce any longer. I went. When he saw me, his lips twisted into a strange, painful smile. So all this time, the reason you did not block me, the reason you agreed to see me, to talk to me, it was only because you were afraid I would change my mind. Isn't that right? I nodded. He asked again. Do you hate me, Juliette? I answered truthfully, used to. For a long time, I hated you. I hated that I ever met you. I hated that I ever loved you. When the dust finally began to settle, when the weight of years spent in a suffocating marriage no longer pressed on my chest, I realized that my heart no longer beat with hatred for Damien Blackwell. There had been a time when the bitterness inside me was so sharp that it carved through every waking thought. I had hated him for his arrogance, for the way he dismissed my dreams, for the way he had crushed my spirit under the guise of wanting me to be better. But as time passed, as I passed my CPA exams and proved to myself that I was capable of building a new life on my own terms, I began to let go. I told Damien that if I were given the chance to live my 20s again, I would still choose him. Not because he was worthy of that choice, but because at that time in my life, I needed someone like him. If it had not been him, it would have been another man who filled the same role. The truth was, back then, I was a mess. I had tied the value of my life to the presence of someone else. Damien had pushed me away, and though that process was agonizing, it ultimately forced me to stand on my own feet. The result was something I had always wanted, but never knew how to achieve. I looked at him in that sterile hospital room, his face pale, his voice trembling with guilt and desperation. For the first time, I saw him not as the man I had once worshipped, but as a broken, flawed human being. I told him plainly that I did not hate him anymore, not because he did not deserve my hatred, but because I refused to keep drowning in the past. Yet at the same time, forgiveness was something I could never give him. The only thing I wanted now was distance, a future where his shadow no longer stretched across my life. True to his word, Damien did not try to twist my decision. We signed the divorce papers smoothly, and the relief that washed over me felt like a second birth. He had the audacity to ask if we could still be friends afterward. I laughed, the sound sharp but not cruel, and reminded him that as a psychiatrist he should know better. Friends, after everything, no. What I wanted was finality, not another diluted version of what had already poisoned me. His words still echoed in my mind, though that line he once told me in one of his better moments. The past cannot be changed, but the future holds countless possibilities. For once, I decided to live by those words, not for him, but for myself. After the divorce, I cut off every trace of Damien. I deleted his number, blocked every possible way for him to reach me, and made peace with the silence that followed. The only thread I kept was Rowan Kingsley, because work still bound us together. 4 months after the papers were signed, Rowan quietly told me that Damien had been accused of inappropriate relationships with his patients. The accusation came from Cassandra Leigh. The evidence was thin, not enough to ruin him outright, but Cassandra refused to stop. She unleashed photos of the two of them, intimate conversations, and even videos of them kissing in public. For a man who once prided himself on control and reputation, it was a devastating blow. Rowan looked unsettled as the news played across his phone screen, ready to turn it off before I could see. But I simply told him I already knew. His eyes widened, but I only smiled faintly. He asked if I wanted to explain why I had stayed with Damien for so long when I had known about Cassandra from the beginning. I stopped him with a shake of my head. The truth was simple. Back then, I was still chained not to Damien himself, but to the belief that my worth depended on him. I had to break those chains piece by piece, and sometimes the only way to break them was to let them cut into your skin until you bled enough to finally be free. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Rowan placed a hand gently on my shoulder and whispered, "You've already done so well, Juliette." In that moment, I realized he saw me differently than anyone else ever had. Not as a victim, not as a woman defined by her pain, but as someone who had fought her way through the fire and survived. I worked with Rowan for nearly a year, filling in for the finance department until he found a permanent replacement. Every month we visited the branch office together, and every time he would pour me a cocktail as if it were our unspoken ritual. He paid me generously, but I never let it be one-sided. I invited him to dinner often, and somewhere along the way, without either of us declaring it, we became friends. Real friends, the kind who listened and cared without expectation. Fiona Mercer, my closest confidant, asked me one evening if Rowan was planning to pursue me. I laughed and shook my head. I don't think so. Then she tilted her head and asked, "But do you like him?" The question left me unsettled. I had never thought of Rowan that way, or perhaps I had been too cautious to allow myself to. I told her no, but she only smiled knowingly and told me not to close myself off from feelings before they even had the chance to bloom. Meanwhile, Damien's life spiraled further down. Blacklisted after Cassandra's relentless accusations, he was dismissed from his clinic. His spotless reputation now stained, he found it difficult to land another respectable position. And still he refused to be with Cassandra. In the end, she was left humiliated and defeated, forced to walk away. I heard Damien tried his hand at business, but the ventures failed miserably. When friends asked me if I felt satisfied watching him fall, I answered honestly yes. I was glad, not out of cruelty, but because his downfall finally marked the closure of a chapter I had once been trapped in. I continued to support my mother financially, though our relationship remained strained. Elaine Ramsay often called me petty, accusing me of clinging to old grievances. I didn't argue. I simply let her words wash over me. I would provide for her in her old age, but my love and resentment alike had been stripped away. That detachment, oddly enough, brought me peace. When my birthday came near the end of the year, I expected nothing. At my age, birthdays had become less about celebration and more about survival. But Rowan surprised me. He invited me to dinner and prepared a table filled with dishes he knew I loved, along with the exact cake I had adored since childhood. He gave me 2 gifts. The first, a simple charm bracelet to wish me happiness. The second, his quiet, steady confession and offer to be more than just a friend. My heart fluttered in a way it had not in years. I said yes, not just to him, but to the promise of living joyfully again. Fiona nearly fell out of her chair when I told her. That's it, you just agreed, no chase, no grand gestures. I only smiled. I like the way it feels with him. That's enough. For me, love no longer needed to be storms and fireworks. It only needed to be steady, kind, and true. Still, curiosity got the better of me. One evening, I asked Rowan when he had first begun to see me differently. He thought for a moment before answering. At first, I didn't notice much. You were Damien's young wife, quiet, obedient, polite. But then one day I went with my mother to Don Huang Temple. I wasn't patient with those things, but you were there standing alone praying with tears on your cheeks. And I realized you weren't the woman Damien described. You weren't weak at all. You were someone carrying so much and still standing. His words sank deep into me, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something like gratitude for all the pain I had endured, because without it, I might never have crossed paths with Rowan in the way that I did. When his mother went inside the temple to listen to the chanting, Rowan Kingsley found himself wandering aimlessly around the quiet courtyard. He had no destination in mind, no real reason to linger, and yet his steps slowed when he caught sight of Juliette Ramsay. She was sitting alone, her face buried in her hands, and she was crying. Not the polite, restrained kind of crying one hides in the corner of a party, but the raw, shattering sobs of someone who had lost all control. Her body shook with every breath, her knees pulled close, as if she were trying to fold herself into nothingness, and the sound that came out of her chest was so broken, it felt like her soul had been hollowed out, leaving behind only an empty shell. Rowan's first instinct was to walk away. Crying was private. No one wanted their weakness to be witnessed, and he wasn't the kind of man who intruded on pain that didn't belong to him. But his feet betrayed him. He stopped. He stayed. Because Juliette's sorrow was not something he could ignore. Her anguish reached out and gripped him by the throat, demanding he see her, demanding he feel the weight of her despair. For a fleeting moment, he thought about pulling out his phone, snapping a picture, and sending it to Damien Blackwell so that Damien could deal with his wife's suffering. But the thought curdled in his mind almost immediately. She was Damien's wife, yes, but if she could find comfort in Damien, would she really be here sobbing alone in front of a temple? That was answer enough. Instead, Rowan walked to the nearest stall, bought a pack of tissues, and wordlessly held it out to her. His vocabulary failed him. His throat closed, and when he finally spoke, all he managed were 3 simple words. Don't cry anymore. She did not remember his face. Later, Juliette would not recall who had handed her the tissues, but Rowan remembered her eyes. Those eyes swimming with despair so vividly, it etched into his memory like fire on paper. At first, he told himself it meant nothing. He had never wanted marriage. He had never wanted love, not the messy kind that consumed and entangled and demanded too much. And besides, she was Damien's wife. But something about her stuck with him. Whenever they crossed paths again, his eyes would drift toward her, wondering if she was still carrying that same sadness. He never admitted it out loud, not even to himself. But he started looking for ways to make her world a little lighter. In the karaoke lounge, he casually told the staff to place the fruit tray closer to her seat. At a banquet, when her favorite dish was about to be spun away from her on the Lazy Susan, he placed his hand firmly on the edge, keeping it in place so she could reach it. Small, unremarkable gestures. Nothing that would mean anything if anyone else noticed. They were no more significant, he told himself, than putting out food for the stray cats that gathered near his building. Just little conveniences. Just instinct. But in truth, it was the beginning of something he could not quite name. Everything shifted when she filed for divorce. Damien accused Rowan of interfering, of conspiring with Juliette behind his back, but Rowan did not defend himself. For 2 years, he had grown more and more intolerant of Damien's arrogance, and this time he decided silence was better than words. His silence was his declaration. She was the one who had been hurt. She was the one who had been wronged, and he would stand on her side without justification. Rowan never thought he would end up with Juliette. The idea of marriage was absurd to him, something he had dismissed long ago. But then a friend, half-joking, asked him if he was secretly nursing a crush, if he was falling into the cliché of unrequited love. The teasing hit harder than he expected. He thought about it for 2 days, unable to shake the question, until finally, in the privacy of his own mind, he admitted it. Yes, he loved her. He loved Juliette Ramsay. The realization startled him as much as it steadied him. For the first time in his life, the thought of marriage didn't feel suffocating. It felt possible. It felt right. 2 years after they began their quiet, tentative relationship, Rowan and Juliette were married. Damien showed up, of course, his anger festering like a wound he couldn't heal. But Rowan met him outside the venue, refusing to let him through the doors. "Don't ruin her day," Rowan said, his voice calm but unyielding. "If you care at all, you won't do this to her." Damien spat venom, accusing Rowan of orchestrating everything, of planning and scheming, until he had stolen Juliette from him. Rowan only sighed. If it weren't for the tailor who had just delivered his suit, he might have thrown a punch. Instead, he turned back once, looked Damien directly in the eye, and said with measured conviction, "There was no plan. Don't insult her like that. She is innocent. She is the one who suffered, not the one at fault." Then he walked away and left Damien standing there, silenced not by defeat, but by the truth he refused to acknowledge. Marriage brought Rowan and Juliette into their own little world. For the first time, peace seemed within reach. He told her one night, almost apologetically, that he didn't want children. He had never wanted them, not before, not now. His mother only shook her head, muttering that he always did whatever he pleased, but she let it go. In her eyes, his agreeing to marry at all was miracle enough. Secretly, she even felt a bit relieved. His bride was younger by 6 years. Surely she would live long enough to handle the burdens he left behind. But Rowan worried. He was afraid Juliette might want something he could not give, afraid she would see his refusal as rejection. When he finally confessed, she only nodded and said softly, "That's perfect. I don't want children either." She had struggled with how to tell him the same thing, worried it made her selfish, worried it made her less of a wife. Her past was too full of scars, her heart too heavy. Healing herself was already a battle. How could she possibly bring life into the world when she wasn't sure she could nurture it the way it deserved? To her, choosing not to start was kinder than risking another broken life. Their decision bound them even closer. The only one who questioned it was Fiona Mercer. "Do you really trust him?" she asked Juliette one evening. This was the man who never wanted to marry at all. What if one day he changes his mind? Men can have children at any age. What then? Juliette didn't flinch. She set down her papers, looked up with a steady gaze, and replied, "You're asking the wrong question. It's not about whether he changes. I don't want children, and he doesn't want them either. That's why we married. If the day comes when we stop sharing that belief, then we'll part ways. It's as simple as that." Fiona pressed again. "But don't you want it deep down?" Juliette's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Should I let fear dictate my life? Should I stop living just because I'm afraid of pain? No. I can't hide forever." Hearing her words, Rowan felt a rush of pride, something warm and undeniable swelling in his chest. The girl he had once seen crying helplessly outside a temple had grown into a woman who spoke with strength and conviction. No, he realized she had always been growing, always becoming stronger piece by piece. Life had knocked her down again and again, but nothing had managed to destroy her. And standing there, watching her hold her ground with such quiet grace, Rowan knew that he hadn't simply found someone to protect. He had found his equal, his partner, his home. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next videos.